What's up, y'all? It's week 4, track chat with the most known unknowns. I'm Coach Kyle Stevenson, head coach of track and field here at Georgia State University in Atlanta, Georgia. We got B. Hassan Stamps at East Tennessee State University, and Lamont Johnson, director of track and field at Johnson C. Smith University in Charlotte. All right, this week we're actually gonna try to dig a little deeper, get a little personal, be more real. We're gonna talk about our personal stories, how we got to the places and where we are in our career, but also really tell some wanted and some unwanted and some cold hard truths about getting a job, not getting a job, searching for a job, navigating the job market in our profession. So let's just start with some personal stories on how you got to where you were, but like really give the people some stuff that they may not hear uh too often. So let's start with you, Lamont.
Um, well, after my eligibility was over, I started doing social work for about 3 years. In between that, I was still training unattached, and I was getting my foot in the door coaching wise. I was also a volunteer coach at Iowa State University. Um, Little fun fact: my last 3 years out there, I had to figure out a way how to survive for $9,000, and you know, by the grace of God, I had a wonderful coach, a wonderful mentor, Steve Lynn, who made sure that anything I needed, I was straight. Um, After he had stepped down from the position at Iowa State, I had moved on to the University of New Mexico. I slept on the couch for a whole year, and I volunteered to coach there. Let me put that in its proper sequence. Once my coach stepped down from Iowa State, I was in Ames, Iowa. One of my dearest, closest friends, Leo Settle, who's now spring coach at SMU, he got the job at the University of New Mexico. He asked me to come down and help him coach the team. Now, I had a job. I was working in the hotel business. I was doing night audit. I was doing the numbers and stuff like that, doing the daily financial records and things of that nature. However, I had no place of my own because I couldn't afford to get a place of my own. So I slept on a couch for a whole year until we got a bigger place and we all able to have our own room. You know, then, after 2 years, volunteered at Alabama. I was sleeping on another couch, but then into another room with Victor Houston and his family, who I am the godfather of his daughter. So, he's family to me, this, that, and the third. I was working odd jobs, and I was, you know, people think I wasn't receiving anything from the University of Alabama, but I was. So shout out to the University of Alabama for taking good care of all their people, especially me, because they didn't have to. Um, I made ends meet. You know, Went out to California in October 2011. We was living over $10,000 in the Bay Area, and me and Lauren Smith, who I consider a dear friend and a sister, we shared an apartment. She was working little odd jobs. You know what I'm saying? I was doing things on the side, nothing illegal, but I was doing things kind of make ends meet. But I wanted this coaching thing so bad that I had to do it. Then I got my first real coaching gig. My first high paid coaching gig at Eastern Michigan, and the rest was history. Um, so that's just a part of my journey that helped lead me to where I am now. We can go into more details afterwards if that's what you want, but that part right there, I believe, is very vital in my success story.
Okay. What about you, Stamps?
I was one of those guys that was fortunate enough to find coaching at an early enough point in my athletic career that I realized like the 9 to 5 corporate America wasn't never really going to be me. Father's an entrepreneur, mom's a nurse, and I got my hard work ethic I think from both of them, but I had always just had this I wanted to make my own hours and kind of move the way I wanted to move, how I wanted to move. And so about midway through my sophomore year, I realized that, you know, thinking about, man, I'm only in college. I went to see Vince Anderson, who was my coach. I ran at the University of Tennessee, as you all very well know. I failed a test, and I went into Vince's office to just kind of vent a little bit. And, you know, I've told this story 100 times, but, you know, he just had his hands stretched behind his head, his feet were up, and he was looking out his window and just with this smile on his face. And I'm like, you know, who just does that? You know, I said, Coach, I don't understand how I'm supposed to know what I want to do with the rest of my life. You know, over 4 or 5 years I'm gonna be in college. And he just said, well, you just got to figure it out, Stamps. And he had this metal, uh, it was kind of like a block, like it was like this big, and it said, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? A question mark. And it was just a metal piece of art that just stayed on his desk. And, you know, in the all too familiar like aha moment, I was like, how do I do what you do? And he just looked at me, and I'm like, serious, man, you get paid to coach track, travel around the country, go around the world. You got all these places you've been on somebody else's dime. I want to do that. That sounds like fun. That looks like something that I could get with, you know? And he went in his desk, he picked up this book, The Theory and Methodology of Training by Tudor Boomba. I think it was a 1972 version. I was in the midst of my semester, and I really wasn't an avid reader for you know, just self-enrichment at that point. He said, if you can make it through this, Stamps, you know, you might be interested in coaching. So I have to tell that story to get into my story, because that, you know, that's why I'm here. You know, I went home, I ate that thing alive, man. 4 days, 370 some odd pages, right under 400 pages. I came back on Monday, I was like, you know, this is what I want to do, Coach. Yes, I want to coach track and field. So first started with Knoxville Youth Track Club in Knoxville, Tennessee. It was a summer club, very, you know, familiar or very similar to Quicksilver, but just, you know, in Knoxville. Had some stated success there. When I graduated University of Tennessee in 2003, I sent not text messages. I sent emails to coaches all across the country. I got 3 responses. Eastern Kentucky for a GA position that was offered to me. FIU, I think Steve Rubin was the coach at that time, and Cal State LA. Now, I'd always had an affinity for my times being an athlete at Tennessee, of living, working, and being in Miami. It's just it's a city that like totally blends to my personality. Being a native from Atlanta, you know, I like city life. I'm a country boy at heart, but you know, I have close access to the city. My mom lives about 25 minutes outside the city. My dad lives right downtown, like 6 blocks from the varsity. So, you know, that's comfortable to me. When I spoke with Coach Rubin at FIU, like I didn't really have any infrastructure. I didn't have a place to stay. You know, I didn't have a job, so I just didn't have that wherewithal to make my way down there. He said I could volunteer, but that was it. I couldn't make that jump. I didn't really see myself being in Eastern Kentucky. I kind of wanted a break from school. So luckily my brother was living in California, San Bernardino, 55 miles one way away from Cal State LA. And my brother said, of course, bro, you can come out. I went out there, volunteered. My first year's salary at Cal State LA was $1,500. I did I used my brother's Jeep because I didn't have my car, and I did a paper route from 3 in the morning till 8 in the morning. I'd go home and sleep from about, let's say, 9 to about 11, close to 12. And then I'd get on the train, because there was a train that would go from San Bernardino up to Cal State LA, directly to Cal State LA. It took me about an hour. But I would ride that, and I'd go to practice from, like, let's say 2 to about 7. And then I'd ride the train back another hour, and then I'd work a security job from about 11 o'clock or about 10 o'clock, 9:30 to about 2. And then I did that every single day for about a year and a half. And then as I coached and got a little bit better, they were able to find some money for me. Shout out to Chris Asher at Cal State LA. And then I was able to teach some classes, some aerobic classes and whatnot. And, was able to get some more money. And eventually my last year at Cal State LA, I was able to move to Pomona. My brother had done a phenomenal job remodeling his house. I put in a lot of work to help him remodel it. So he broke me off, a couple of grand. And then I was able to just kind of, have the apartment close to campus. That was about 25 miles away from Cal State LA and out in Pomona. Then I got my first full-time job. That was 2003 to 2006. I got my first full-time job at the University of Vermont, Burlington, Vermont. So from LA to the northeast of New England. Was at the Vermont for a year, 2006 to 2007. And then I did so well at University of Vermont, I was interviewed and offered jobs after that year at Mississippi State, University of Miami, and I interviewed at Alabama. I really wanted the Alabama job. Harvey tried his best. Sandy Fowler really liked me at that time, but she said I was just too young. She didn't think I was ready for the SEC. So they didn't offer me the job. Mississippi State did, but when I had the Mississippi State offer and the Miami offer, I was like, here I am, 27, 28-year-old man. And, I got two of my friends here on the phone. And I did uniquely think, what would my friends think of me if I had the opportunity to live in Miami, Florida, over Starkville, Mississippi at this current stage of my life? And how I knew what they would say. So I took the job at the University of Miami, was there for a year, and then went over to FIU. So very, it's one of those, I think my path was very unique in the sense of, very often you don't get to change jobs and stay in the same city. So there was just a phenomenal opportunity, an upstart program to have a little bit more input into it. And that's, people were like, you're crazy for leaving Miami to go to FIU. But, I thought that it was a good move, and I really think it was, because it helped shape and mold the person that I am today. I was at FIU for about 3 years. Then I went up to Southern Illinois, Edwardsville, for 2 years, or 2.5 years, but it was interrupted by my 2 years that I spent in overseas coaching in Saudi Arabia. So I had this very unique opportunity while I was at SIUE. And big shouts to Kareem Jackson, who was at SIUE at the time, was super, I guess, forward thinking to realize that he had an assistant on his staff that was offered an opportunity to coach internationally, and he allowed me to maintain and keep my job there. And I was one of the first coaches to coach remotely. So here I was, during the day, or at nighttime, it was a daytime in Illinois, and then I'd go, during the daytime in Saudi Arabia with my guys out there. So I was, they'd bring their computers out to the track, and I run practice through Uvu, that messaging platform that was, just as the digital age was coming to, to position that it is, to where you could video conference, people from, thousands of miles away. And then after the time I spent in Saudi Arabia, I made my way to ETSU to work for one of my coaches at the University of Tennessee that I ran under, George Watts. So that's my origin story. I'm an X-Men fan, so I've always appreciated how people get from where they're at to, or from where they started to where they're at, and that's mine.
Okay. I'll make mine really, really quick. So, I'm gonna use when I first graduated, 2010, when I graduated from the University of Tennessee, and I want you all to remember this point because it should come back up later in the conversation. So, 2010, I wasn't looking to be a coach at all. Ended up coaching for Knoxville Track Club at the time, some 6-year-olds, and we went to nationals, broke like the national record in every single relay. So it's like, maybe I have a niche for this. Me, I was just like, I'm gonna wing it. So that following year, 1 second. Get her. I got her.
He's on daddy duty, people.
I'm on daddy duty. She's good. She don't like to be put down. So anyway, so that same year, going into the fall 2010, I saw that Georgia State, the school that I'm currently at, it had an opening in the sprints. I didn't have any experience whatsoever, but I was like, you know what? Why not? I'm gonna just send an email and just see what happens, because I've always had the attitude a person can only tell me yes or no. That's it. And I think later on in this conversation, as we started to talk about how to navigate and being a young coach, you know, we'll get into that a little bit more. But anyway, I say that to say this. I applied for the Georgia State job every single year that it was open, from 2010 all the way up to 2017 when I actually got the job. But anyway, my journey went like this. My actual first collegiate job was at East Tennessee State University. I made $12,000 for that entire year. That came with sleeping on the floor on an air mattress at her son's house. So appreciative of it. Did that for a year and a half, and then I had the opportunity to move to a Division II level, first full-time job in the state of Washington, St. Martin's University. Ended up, I coached a 2-time national champion high jumper, but with that, I thought that it came as a fluke that first year. So I wanted to, during my second year, I wanted to prove myself wrong to make sure that it just wasn't, I didn't get lucky. So he came right on back and we did it again. So from there, I knew that I was ready to move on. And me moving on meant I was ready to move back closer to the South, back to where I knew track and field was really, really competitive. Just in a small region. I just know in the Southeast, you're going to get some of the best track and field possible just because of so many schools that are in that region that are competitive in our sport. And I wanted to move into Division I. So from there, East Tennessee State to St. Martin's. I didn't even apply for the Georgia State job in 2017, believe it or not. I didn't even know that it was open. Her son actually reached out to me. He said, there's an opportunity I think you should take a look at. I'm going to tell the guy to call you. So he did. The rest is kind of history. And now 2.5, 3 years later, I'm now the head coach at Georgia State. So that's my short journey. But we're going to get into some fun stuff later on. So Hassan, you said something that actually leads to the next question. You said, and it was the move you made from Miami to FIU, and people, they weren't too supportive of that. So the next question I pose for you guys, give me 1 or 2 things. So 1 or 2 moves, now 5, 10 years in, 10 years plus, if there was something you could go back and do differently or do it again, what would that be? 1 or 2 things you would either make the same move or move differently. Lamont?
I got two situations. I probably would have got to Alabama a year earlier. Instead of being there for 2 years, I'd have been there for 3. And the reason why I say that is because one day we was at the track and, practice was concluding and whatever the case may be. And, Coach Glantz kind of looked at me. He was like, son, I really wish you was here for the previous 2 years that you was at, while you was at the University of Mexico. You should have came here. And, we looking at the hindsight, I didn't know Coach. I just knew him from the track meets. I knew he was a smooth guy at the meets, and my head coach, Coach Lynn always spoke highly of him, you know what I'm saying? Or spoke about him in a joking manner, Coach G is he's the ladies' man, you know what I'm saying? So that was always a running thing with him, prior to him getting married, respectfully, and I say that respectfully. And then the other thing I probably would have done differently, I probably would have stayed at Academy of Art, because to this very day, and I think me and everyone that was a part of that staff, I feel that we had unfinished business on that men's side, and we never got to see it to fruition. So I probably would have stayed at Academy of Art for at least one more year, because I personally don't think I was fulfilled leaving Academy of Art. I don't think I was fulfilled, so Those are the two things. I'm keeping mine very short, under 2 point something minutes.
It's okay. So Lamont, I want you to hold on to that second point. I don't think I'm gonna forget it, but hold on to that second one, because I think that is something that maybe as a young coach, but probably any coach at any given time of their career, they may leave too soon. All right, so hold on to that. All right, what about you, Stamps?
I would say my two things. One, I had an opportunity to come back to Tennessee after my national champion. I coached in concert. I didn't just do it by myself at Cal State LA. When Vince had decided to leave, there was an opportunity for me to come back, but it was before Norbert had got the job, and they didn't know there was this big name rustling around, Dan Paff, any of the higher up type of people's names was getting thrown around. And Coach Webb was adamant that, hey man, Vince's stuff, you've gone out and done well. But the catch was, we're gonna bring in a bigger name, and because we have all of our accountable coaches, you can't coach. Like, you can be a Diops, or we can get you something in the academics. And I'm like, well, coach, if I want to coach, I thought my experience was in coaching. I feel like it would have been to my benefit, looking back, to maybe take that advice, because understanding the weight of what Tennessee has just meant, for me in the entirety of my professional life, I probably would have positioned myself a bit farther ahead to a assistant position inside another SEC program, versus kind of having that young bravado of, well, you're hedging my bets on me not being, there's a chance that I'm not coaching at all. I don't understand. I want to coach. I don't understand this whole politic and recruiting position. You just want me to be the face of something. Like, I didn't get that. So again, I said, I'm gonna go coach, and I'll just, pull myself up by my own bootstraps. Coach, I appreciate it, but y'all taught me that to build a resume, I got to coach people. And you're telling me in the start of my coaching career to not coach for a year or two. I didn't understand those things, and nobody really sat me down to say anything. It was very not, well, from what I remember, I feel like the conversation I had with Coach Webb was, very similar to, Stamps, you can do more if you stay, even if you're not coaching, just because of whatever. But then I was like, but coach, but you're telling me that there's a greater chance I'm not going to coach. You just want me to babysit. I don't get to implement none of my stuff. You just want me to babysit from now till y'all get the person in place. So I felt slighted. And for me to come out of the program, that's what I felt like. I'm like, you don't take, if you're going to take.
Hold on, Stamps, hold on to that point right there. You felt slighted. And the reason for that is, you may or may not know this story. So my personal thing, and it's not that I would necessarily do anything differently, but I shared those type of feelings because even after my first season with you at East Tennessee State, I think I had a job opportunity at Wake Forest. I think the school was Wake Forest. Coach Watts pulled me in. He said, "You're not ready." He said straight up, "You not ready." So he pulled the reins on me. At the same time, I remember sitting in your office several times and me learning how to program. And you made it clear, like, nah, you need to learn this, this, and this, and this, and like open your mind up to this. And the reason I wanted to pause you there, because I want both of you all to now elaborate more, because the next point is, like, what advice would you give a young coach? And not the stuff we always hear, not the stuff that's always being said. Like, now sharing those personal feelings that you had because I've been a young coach, and we've all been teenagers. So we know when we feel like we're invincible, like we know it all, like we know more than the head coach, like we know more than the next assistant coach, so we've shared those feelings in some form or fashion. So what advice would you give a young coach?
All right, let me answer this first, and then you can answer a lot, because it definitely ties into what I was saying. I think we as a profession need to go back to like a vocational like thought process. where you're an apprentice, right? And a person that's learning under somebody is not allowed to make a move to do their own thing till a certain period of time. You know, you got electrician apprentices, woodworking apprentices, all carpentry apprentices, all that kind of stuff. And I think if there was a very outlined and defined apprenticeship point, no different than, you got to go to med school for 6 or 7 years before you become a doctor, and the residency and all that whole processing in there, I think that would allow the opportunity for people to not feel pressure, that's the word I'm looking for, or this sense that, oh, I am, like, because as confident individuals, we right now, University of whoever would call right now and say, hey, can you do the job? And you can be like, yeah, I can do it. Because we're not that kind. We have the bravado of, you're not, you're going to have to go prove that you're better than me between the lines, on the right and left levels. So I think that the best advice I would give would be, shut up. Know that there is a finite amount of time. It takes, 8 to 10 years to become elite at anything. It takes 8 to 10 years to become elite in anything. And now that everybody's watching The Last Dance, Michael Jordan was in the league how long before he won his first chip? All I gotta say.
All right, so I want you to repeat the specific question that you want us to address, Kyle. You're on mute.
But yeah, I had to unmute. My specific question is this: what advice would you give a young coach, like based off of what you've experienced, those personal feelings you may have had, because you spoke on possibly leaving too soon at the Academy of Art, and then in Hassan's case and my case, we felt like we were ready to be somewhere, but now looking back at it, not necessarily that we were. All right. So yeah. So what advice would you give a young coach?
Patience. And I know that sounds cliche, but patience. The problem with a lot of young coaches is that they want to skip the line. If you understand what I'm saying. Every job is not yours. Okay? Not everybody can be, I'll just go ahead and say it. Not everybody's gonna be lucky like a Ricky Morgan. Okay? Everyone's not gonna be that fortunate.
Okay?
Okay? Everyone's not gonna be that lucky to where, they're gonna be placed in an opportunity where they just automatically boom. That's an outlier. You know what I'm saying? That's not the norm. That's an outlier. Okay, so I want the young coaches to understand that. Second thing, and it goes with the first thing, pay your dues. Okay? Don't be scared to struggle. Okay? So think about this for a second, man. I'm at the time a young man from New York City. I have bounced around from Iowa, New Mexico, Alabama.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. I'm sorry. When you talk, when we're both talking at the same time. No, when you talk at the same time, it cuts out the vocals on my end. So California, Michigan, Virginia, Wisconsin, now in North Carolina. Gotta pay your dues, man. Gotta pay your dues. All right. Don't be scared because things aren't lined up as perfect. You have to make the most excellent situation possible. Okay. Yes, you're gonna have to go. If you're a volunteer coach, yes, you're gonna have to go out there and go get a side gig. Believe you me, 98% of them coaches are gonna understand. All the coaches I worked for, whether it was Steve Lynn, Scott Roberts, Joe Franklin, Harvey Glantz, they all understood. Jill Lancaster, they all understood. Yo, I got to get another job. Oh, I got class. They all understood my position, and so they let me grow in the position with at the rate in which I need to grow at. Stop and understand this. And I heard somebody say this, and I'm gonna repeat exactly what this man said. Look for a mentor But if you're gonna be a mentee, you gotta trust what the mentor is teaching you. Point blank. That was the one thing that made the most sense to me. If you're gonna be a mentee, you gotta trust what the mentor is telling you. And if the mentor tells you, yo, you're not ready, I got the same story that y'all both had. I applied for Arizona State. At this time, I was 25, 26 years old. Coach Lynn, God rest his soul, looked at me and said, boy, I'm not sending you down there. Because Coach Kraft actually called. Said, yo, look, I need a young up-and-coming coach I can nurture this and that third. He said, nah, he ain't going down there. And when we tell you the exact thing he said to me, and I excuse the nature of what I'm about to say. He said, Lamont, I think I was 25, 26. He said, Lamont, you're 25. At Arizona State University. You're 25. Put 2 and 2 together. Mm-hmm. Hell no, I'm not sending you down there. I will not. And he told me he wasn't going to recommend me. And he told Coach Kraft he's not ready. So we all had that story. And to the younger coaches, don't take offense to that. All right. They're saving you from you.
Good point.
Great point. Great point. I've been in that awkward position to where I'll leave the name of the university out, but you're recruiting a lot of attractive young ladies, Stamps. And as a single guy with no kids, as a young coach, you got to make sure that there is 100% no funny business, set proper boundaries, young coaches, you as small as the world is now with social media and just communication, you can't be in the mindset where your kids or student athletes think it's all right to text you after a certain period of time during the day. Right. You know what I mean? Like all my kids know, I said, if you hit me after 9 o'clock, you better be like coach. When Kyle was there, he says, you better be locked up. Or wait, before we send everybody home for breaks and weekends, he was like, don't get locked up. Don't get in no fight. Don't get pregnant. Guys, don't get nobody pregnant. That's how we would send our kids off every single time that they was parting our ways. And it was a known fact that, you guys can't, you young coaches can't, there's the reality of what things are and the perceived optics of what things are. And while we might not have any, like, oh, you're not thinking of stuff like that. Like, I'm a Southern guy. And, Kyle might have heard me or whatever. I call a lot of my female athletes baby from time to time. And it is no pet word. All right, baby girl, go do that. Go ahead. Mom. It isn't that. But for an outside person looking in, you always got to be mindful of your surroundings and how you're to be perceived, because there's still this very real sense and presence amongst administrators that some young up-and-coming coach or young coach that coaches with females is a predator and a wolf in sheep's clothing.
And really quick with that, Hassan, I can say, and I've never shared this before, but that has actually been one of my biggest fears in my early college career, because I'm still very, very young. And even taking the position at Georgia State, man, I am in Atlanta, Georgia, as a Black man, so you can only imagine just what I see, what I come across. And like you, so what I've always done, I've tried to make it, very standard. And I address any of my women athletes as ladies at all times, so just showing that level of respect, letting them know, like, I'm going to address you as lady to establish, like, this is the type of business relationship that we're going to have, and definitely, like, meetings happen with the door open, no texting, calling out and stuff. Like, those things make a difference after a certain time.
Let me add on to what you just said, and I'm going to emphasize what you said. For the assistant coaches and head coaches alike, there's this thing called a boundary line that should never be crossed. One thing about my team, they know that I established that from the gun. Here's the line. You stay over there. I stay over here. And for the young assistant coaches, yes, most of the time they want you to be the good cop. And that's where most assistant coaches get in trouble. Because lines are blurred. Lines are distorted, lines are blurred. And then when you have to be the bad cop, all of a sudden, we got a problem. Because once again, and this is for male and female athletes, like I'm not gonna target one gender. But now all of a sudden, you know what I'm saying, you got people out there dredging up stuff or making up stuff, whatever the case may be, and now you got another problem on your hands. So for young assistant coaches, you're not their friend. You're not protecting them from the big bad wolf known as the head coach. You're not their friend. Okay? You are the mentor. You are the provider. When I say provider, it means you gotta make sure they get the meats, make sure they got the uniforms, make sure they eat, make sure they get back to and from the competition and back home safely. That's what you are. Right? You're not their cousin. You're not their homeboy. All right. I don't so much even like anyone addressing any of my coaches by first name basis. And I told all my kids, you have to address us by coach. Now, if he says you want to, if he or she wants to say, hey, address me by Coach Tina or Coach Lamont, that's fine. But coach better be in front of it. Don't you address me by Lamont. I'm not your friend. Because that right there is where the lines get blurred, and you have to stop it right there. So all young coaches, stop all that stuff from becoming, because understand something. If the head coach sees something, if he don't like the way it looks, remember, I told every assistant coach this. The minute you pull my power out of my hands, you on your own. So if I sit back and tell you, yo, you better chill, because he gonna get rid of you before they get rid of him.
All right, let me stop you right there, Lamont, because we might have to do a whole segment on just young coaches. I want to flip it before we run out of time, because we still got like 15 minutes left. But it's two more questions I really want to get to. Number one, so we just dealt with the young coaches. What advice would you tell an older coach? And I want you to address it, because y'all are in that in between. You know, you've been in the game a while, but you're still fairly young. You know, you got a lot of experience, you seasoned, but it's like you're far removed enough to not necessarily just getting started, but you're also a well ways away, you know, before you really step out the game. So what advice would you give those older coaches? Because we're always bashing the younger coaches. We're always screaming and yelling what the younger coaches need to do.
I'll make it quick. Do more. Give a little bit more. Be a real mentor. If that young man or that young woman pick up the phone to talk to you, call them back. That's the one thing I will say. Bring up and help bring up other young coaches as well. Not just the one that you're mentoring, but if you see a young man, if you see a young coach at a meet and he's not, looking the part, pull him to the side. Prime example, NCAAs in Birmingham. This past March, there was two coaches sitting in the audience while they was doing the whole NCAA. They got to go over the rules and all that stuff where everything is. So I text him. I said, "Yo, do me a solid." So I said, "Tell your man, take that baseball hat off and take that damn do-rag off. He's not at the crib." I said, "It's how he's looking. He's trying to get a job. He's not trying to be in that position too much longer." And perception is reality. Remember, perception means more to us than it is for everybody else. I'm sorry, that's what it is. Us and females. Okay? So things like that to me, things like that got to be done. Go ahead, Stams.
I would say older coaches need to do a better job speaking to the powers that be when certain individuals are ready for opportunities that they know exist, but they don't want their institution to take a step back if they lose said person. Like I'm a firm believer that a good you're only as good as the people you hire. But a director's job is to direct. And if a director's job is so worried about not being able to reinvest said time, energy, or opportunity into somebody else, that stagnates the person that's ready to go. Think of a movie set. The director is the person that says, well, no, it's got to look this way, or no, it's got to be this way, or this shot's got to come in from this angle. We got to come for the power segment from the bottom up. You know, they're making the whole picture come together. But as you could, I mean, there's an assistant director, and eventually that assistant director gets to direct his own movie and, you know, write a script or what have you. And I can tell you, in 17 years of coaching, I have not had the experience from any coach that I work for where they said, hey, Stamps, here's an opportunity that you'd be ready for. You're going to kill it. I'm going to do everything I need to do to make sure you have an opportunity at it. That has never happened for me. And if it hasn't happened for me, I'd like to think that it might not have happened for Coach Kyle or Lamont. Or if it has, let's talk about it. Or if I'm one, I'm sure there's maybe 10, because we all know that there are longstanding assistant coaches at certain places. And to me, it's not in this, it's going to sound really bad with the tag word that I use with it, but it's like indentured servitude, not yet slavery, but like you're tied to what the director of that program is tied to the success of that longtime assistant coach, and they don't want to see the good guy go, or the good young woman go, or the good woman go, or the good man go. So they'll just do enough to keep the guy or woman happy, but not yet say, you can go be on your own. You're ready to go be on your own. It's very dark professionally in that realm of where there are directors, again, and this is my experience, where there are directors willingly offering up their top assistants to other programs. More often than not, other programs have to come after top assistants.
Okay. I agree with them both, man. And I'll share a quick just mentor story. Shout out to Eric Jenkins, man. And this happened this year at an indoor track meet. And I've been known for wearing my hat backwards. I always have. And he walked up to me and rewind. I asked Eric Jenkins to be my mentor back in December at convention. I walked straight up to him. I said, look, I've watched how you've been moving from the time I was an athlete and now me coaching. I want you to mentor me. Straight up. He said, I got you. So fast forward to the indoor season. He saw me at a meet. This was recently after, you know, it had been announced that I was head coach. He said, hey, man, turn your hat around. He said, you're head coach now. So I understand that perception piece. I'm like, you know, now every now and then I may flip it back, but I'm so conscious now to turn it back around, especially when I'm out at meets, when I'm in, you know, the right settings, you know. And then, you know, to Hassan's point, to be honest, Hassan, outside of you calling me about the Georgia State job, in my experience, I've yet to see a very vetted coach reach down, like really reach their hand down and say, man, you know, I was sitting at the house after the NCAA regional meet, and boy, Western Carolina really had 3 or 4 good jumpers. You know, let me check out their coach's profile. Let me see who may be doing something. Just to say, man, I see you only in your second or third year of coaching. I want to help you. I just straight up, just for no reason. I don't want to offer you a job, you know, but I just want to help you. Like I've accomplished these things and that, but because of that, and I see that you may have that potential, I want to help you. And so I agree with you. I haven't seen it,
Yeah,
in my shoe. Yeah.
and I have to, because I just went back to it. It's happened. It has happened to me one time, Vince. So that year that I had Alabama, Mississippi State, and Miami, Vince Vince was 100% involved in making a few phone calls and talking me up to those people. But again, that's the coach that's like my dad, best friend, and I ran for him. So outside of that, when you earn your stripes and you get your stars and you've been able to stand on your own, it shouldn't have to be so close. You know what I mean? Like it shouldn't have to be someone that you have a personal tie to, because again, your work speaks for itself.
I agree. And so this is gonna lead us into our last question, believe it or not. And this is what I want to finish on. So I'll start this one. And it simply is, how do you, and this is for any coach at any level, how do you keep a coach motivated when it doesn't seem like the progress is being made? All right, that's the question. How would you keep a coach motivated? So what would you say to a coach in order to keep them motivated when they feel like no progress is being made? So I'll start this one.
Define the progress that we're speaking on specifically, or are we looking at the overall perspective of things?
Okay, so we'll look at progress as them making a vertical move, like being able to make a vertical move. So me being a business major undergrad, it was like back then, like you should always look to be moving either within your company or to the next company in position. Yep, every about 2 to 3 years. So that can be, I was so Stamps. I could have been director of ops. We can use the George Watts model. You could go from student manager, director of ops to GA to assistant coach to associate head to head. Like that's a progression that can all happen at the same university. Or I started at assistant at East Tennessee State part time. Then I moved Division II full time. Then I moved Division I full time. So whatever that progression may be. But I'm tying my point back into the previous one, Stamps, as far as what really would have kept me personally motivated, and I've spoken to a few other coaches about this, is that last point. If an experienced coach just sometimes just reach down, because I know there are some people out there looking at results just like I do, just like you do. And I think when the Coaches Association came out with like that event squad ranking this year, I love seeing it because at least for our institution, it was one time where we could stand out where we may not necessarily stand out, because for majority of the indoor season, we were the 10th best ranked jump school in the country. And so that said a lot, but it would have meant a lot more if I had gotten a call, even from, I'm gonna call him out. I'm gonna say from Norbert Elliott. That was my collegiate coach at Tennessee, but it would have meant something and would have kept me motivated if I just know a big dog is looking at me and not waiting till I've been doing it 10 plus years.
Yeah.
Give me my roses where I can smell them. And also, it doesn't always have to be the young gun reaching up. Sometimes big dog reach down, pull me up,
Right.
because a thank you and acknowledgement can go a long way, a longer way than a dollar sometimes. So, Stamps, what about you? So, what would you tell any coach to keep them motivated that feels like they haven't been making any progress?
It goes back to what Mont said about 20 minutes ago. Be patient, man. The one thing that I'm gonna give away a secret. Damn it. Here's why I'm always gonna be employable no matter what, is because I moonlit as a jumps and multis coach for the first 10 years of my career, because I knew in my own mind my sprints and hurdles and relays was the bee's knees, was the deal. I knew that. And I wanted to go improve my coaching wares and events that I had no business doing well in. So then when I don't want to be typecast as always and only knowing this, right? So as I've gotten older and as my professionalism has grown, you have to make yourself indispensable within the program that you work for. And how you do that is by being first to, I got that, coach. Who wants to do hotels? I got that, coach. Who wants to do rental cars? I got that, coach. Who wants to fundraise? I got that, coach. It's time for meet setup. Knock that out, coach. Uh, and then taking on things on your own. So then when times might get slim, when you might step out of line, we all do. You say the wrong thing, or you get a violation, or you just totally mess up something. They realize they need you. They realize they need you. So the biggest, I think, advice I could give somebody is become indispensable, not by your X's and O's, because all the coaches will tell you it's not about the X's and O's. If your administrative work is tight, if your recruiting is top notch, and you're personable to a point that you know that there's going to be a small mutiny if if there is removal of you, don't give your detractors ammunition in your removal. And to go back to that last point that I would have told myself at an earlier age is be patient. You do know these things and you had this window into a national program. Just because other people didn't realize that, it wasn't your point or your place to tell them they're running their program wrong. And that's what I did wrong as a very young coach, because shout out to DJ Khaled, all I did was win. And I tried to tell people what that was like, and they didn't like the way we went about winning. And being inside somebody else's program, I didn't have the astute professionalism of, oh, that could come off very disrespectful, insubordinate, and just wrong. So that's the advice I would give is be good at the things you can be good at that are within your control. If you have an administrative task within your staff to have the meals ready, have them ready. To do the hotels, make sure that stuff is good and on point and no mistakes. That's take take ownership in all the things that ain't got nothing to do with the X's and O's, because that's what we do.
All right, Lamar, bring us home.
Um, as far as goals, upward movement, let's be honest, we're talking about volunteer, assistant, potential head coach at a small school into the Power Five, because that's everyone's go to. Okay. Um, First thing I would say is conduct yourself properly. Do everything that Stamp said. I agree with. Understand the program that you're in and be the best you. Be the best assistant. And how you move up in the rankings is that your number one mouthpiece is the person that you're going to be working for. Your second mouthpiece is how you walk throughout society when you at those meets. If you understand what I mean. So, the best advice I can give young coaches is keep plugging away, remain patient, understand that every job is not your job. Okay, if you don't get that job, that's okay. Stay where you at, and then when the time comes, you'll be able to move forward. But you have to make sure that you master all the things that you need to master and step out of your comfort zone. Just don't be a sprint coach. Learn them damn jumps. Learn the mid distance. When I say mid distance, I'm talking about like the 815. Because sometimes I know some sprint coaches, like I know one sprint coach right now got a coach the 800, and he was asking me for advice. You know what I'm saying? He's one of the prominent sprint coaches in America. So that's what I would say to help young coaches move up and break through and be and get to that point where they want to get to. Main thing is patience, man. It's gonna come, right? It's gonna
All right, and the only thing I'll add to that, and this is personal and it may help somebody out, is take a calculated risk. I think you got to take risks. I think in everybody's story, whether it been only making $1,500 in the Bay or 10 grand in Cali, um, it was a calculated risk in some sense. And for me, Like I wouldn't have taken that East Tennessee State job if I wasn't comfortable with where I was financially. But that's me personally, So I encourage people, if you ain't never had the struggle, don't put yourself in a struggle. You know what I'm saying? And you have no rhyme or reason because you haven't seen it before. So don't do that. And so like everybody else's parents, I come from a blue collar city, from the city of Memphis. My parents are both very blue collar people. So I understood that. I knew what it was like to possibly miss a meal or, have a small meal, things like that. But I knew that they did the best that they could. But that allowed me later on, man, I've always been a hustler. So in me taking calculated risk starting with East Tennessee State, I knew I had enough money in my savings account that I knew I could get by on that first year and not really making no money. And then once we started to roll around into year 2, I was like, well, I'm gonna have to go get me a part-time job. And that's exactly what I did. Versus I knew for me to have to get my first full-time position, it was gonna take me away from my friends, my family, whatever chick I was talking to, and I moved 2,000 miles away to the other side of the country. It was still a calculated risk because I knew it was only temporary. I knew I had to go out there, and I will shout out Coach Elliott for this because I talked to him right before I took this job as well. He said, don't get stuck out there. He's like, go shine. He said, then go look for the next one. And that's exactly what I did. And when we talk about the calculated risk, bringing it on back to the South in Atlanta, I was exactly where I wanted to be in my career. I knew that I was comfortable, prepared, experienced, and ready to be in Division One. And at Georgia State, it came at the right time. But everything was always calculated. It was a risk, so you got to figure out what's within your calculations and what's affordable and attainable for you. But you can't be afraid to take that leap even when your number get called. So that would be mine. Fellas, I definitely enjoyed this week. We definitely gotta keep doing this. We gotta do a young coaches segment. I think we got to get some older coaches on here, do like a mentoring segment, because I think there's been a revolving door and a revolving conversation. Like young coaches want to know how can they navigate this profession. But I always think it's more one-sided than it is the other, but I can't wait for next week, man. I enjoy these conversations. So we're going to sign off. All right. So I'm Coach Kyle Stevenson. This has been Track Chat, with my guys, Lamont Johnson and Hassan Stamps. We'll see you next week.
Yo!